Hi. First of all, I love the movie. I was just wondering if anyone in the production got an advance copy of the sixth book, and if it influenced any of the writing or the character choices.
Yeah, basically how it worked was, when I first was asked about it, the first book had been published, and the second book had been written but not drawn. So, and this was back in 2004, so over the course of the 6 years, Brian's been writing the book, and through various kind of delays on my part, which are all like, blessings in disguise. Like I went off to make Hot Fuzz, which took like 2 years. And it was also like a writer's strike as well, which kind of like stopped Hollywood for nearly an entire year. So throughout that time, Brian kind of like, by the time we started filming, 5 books had been published and the 6th book had been written, mostly written. Or certainly, but even throughout that process, very early on, back in 2005, myself and Michael McCall, who wrote the screenplay, had gone to Toronto to hang out with Brian and basically sort of picked his brains on where he saw the story going. And we had all the X's worked out, and so he kind of wrote some sort of very vague sort of story arcs, and some of them stayed true in the books, and some of them he kind of went off, and some of the bits that are in the film that are not in the books come from his original like longhand scribblings, like the idea that the twins were like an electro act, like a Japanese craft work, was kind of from Brian's like original notes, and he didn't end up doing that in the books, but we thought we'd keep it. So in that sense, it was a nice organic collaboration, and because quite early on, once we, the decision was made that we were going to do like sort of all 7 X's in one film, we knew that we had to kind of like create, as the adaptation, it had to become like the bizarro version of Scott Pilgrim. It's kind of almost like an alternate reality in a different time scale. And Brian was really, if it had been like an Alan Moore situation where I hadn't had any contact with Brian, I probably wouldn't have done the film at all. But he was a really great collaborator because he was kind of cool with the diversions that we did. If he thought there was something that was wrong, that was not true to a character, he'd tell us, and so he kind of became the unofficial script doctor in places. And there are even weirdly, where it gets really incestuous, is there are bits from the first couple of drafts of the script done in like 2006 and 7 that ended up in volumes 4 and 5. So there's the odd kind of like line in the books that is taken from our screenplay. Like, and I'm not to take any credit away from Brian, because I'm literally saying like 3 bubbles max. Not like whole plot lines. But like Scott Pilgrim's line, you had a sexy phase, with like one that Brian read in our screenplay and emailed me and said, "Can I have that one?" I said, "Of course." It's very polite of you to ask, but of course.
It's a sexy phrase.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Hey.
Let's give it up for this man.
We've got the Scotaholic section over here.
Are you in costume? I can't really see.
No, I'm wearing a tie though.
Okay. You dressed up as Sean over there.
I actually, yeah.
Dressed as a gentleman.
Yeah.
That's correct.
A gentleman and a scholar.
My name's Tim. So first off, I really like the scene, the Seinfeld scene, the sitcom scene. I thought it was great. So it's like these little bits kind of taken from a lot of different things. I was really wondering, how much did you put into, because I know you keep talking about Brian, collaboration with Brian Lee O'Malley, and a lot of things they've done in the past, so your own work, but how much of this was you?
I don't know really. It's just, I wanted to stay really true to the books, and even in places where we diverged from the plot of the books, at least, I hope there's sensibility and humour and spirit is there. Because I thought the books were great, and I just thought it was, when I read them, like the first thing that aside from the central premise of like Scott Pilgrim fighting for love, I just thought the mix of like humour and romance and action and, like magical realism was just, irresistible. And I just thought, I'd never seen like a film like that. I've certainly never seen like a Western film like that, certainly like Bollywood films and kind of Hong Kong films kind of go a little bit more crazy than, your own studio film here. But like, so it was irresistible really, But I don't know, things kind of expand, certainly in terms of bringing the action and some of the gags from the page to live action, things kind of get bigger, or, there's obviously things that, we had to kind of solve a problem which Brian never had to think about, is what do the bands sound like. So that was something where we kind of, to a certain extent, started from scratch. From, you know, Brian kind of like didn't really know or care what the Sex Bomb sounded like, and he just drew the lines and kind of had a few vague ideas, but just let us kind of run with it. So I don't know. I'd like to think that it's like, I mean, I didn't write Spaced, the TV show, but Simon and Jessica wrote that. But I feel like my, you know, fingerprints are over that, and maybe this is the same. But I don't want to take any credit away from Brian. I mean, the books are amazing. Does that answer your question?
First off, I really like your Ramona shirt, and secondly, what were each of your favorite scenes to film?
This Ramona shirt, it should be worth pointing out, the sketch that like Michael holds up in the film is a Brian Lee O'Malley original, so he actually did this sketch. And in our script, in the storyboards, I thought that Scott Pilgrim should hold up a perfectly rendered Brian Lee O'Malley Ramona. And it was Brian's idea, he said it should be like a spastic drawing. So this is Brian's Ramona Doodle, so we made shirts out of it. My favourite song, my favourite bits of film, I mean, the fight scenes are like incredibly fun to conceive and edit together, but they're not boring to do, but they're incredibly meticulous and painstaking. So something like the Patel, any of the fights would take at least 2 weeks to shoot. And we shot the film over like 104 days, and I think sort of maybe the Patel fight was, that whole scene in the rocket was about 3 weeks of filming, which is crazy. So I'd say the fun bits maybe are bits where, aside from some of the comedy bits, I'd say doing the music sections are fun, because they'd be the one bits where like you actually just let the actors really let rip, and just, you know, you're shooting kind of like a little mini concert. So in a way, like sort of, apart from like picking the shots and stuff, it was kind of like making little music videos in the middle of the film, or little musical sequences. So those were really fun to do. So I think sort of like shooting the things like Garbage Truck and shooting the kind of the Sex Bomb versus the Twins was a lot of fun. You know, they like doing little musical set pieces. So yeah.
I liked doing all the fight stuff. That was all really fun. And then another moment that really stands out to me is one of the first things we shot was one of the opening shots in the movie when the camera's pulling back, and we're playing our song, and then it goes behind the couch, and it was really fun to do because Edgar had like a crane pulling back, and the couch was on a track, and it was like the first week of shooting, so it was just really exciting, and it was kind of scary because me and Mark and Allison were having to play the song, and we were nervous in front of the crew, and
That was the second day of the shoot?
yeah, second day. A lot of nervous energy, and it just made us really excited about the shoot, because that was a cool kind of camera trick, and that was just really fun.
Also, Mark Webber, like in that shot, Michael already knew how to play guitar and bass, but Alison Pill and Mark Webber and Brandon Ralph all had to learn to play their instruments, to do their bits. And Nigel Godrich, who was amazing, who kind of worked on the score, he was around on that day, and he's amazing, but he is like, especially with the actors, especially with Mark Webber, he was like the Simon Cowell on set. He would absolutely terrify Mark Webber, because he would be one of those people that just after every take would be like... Very begrudging praise from Nigel. He was a really hard taskmaster in a great way.
I loved fighting Michael. It was a pleasure, and we were laughing all the time. I mean, it was serious, and it was a lot of work, but we were laughing at just sort of how unreal it all seemed, because we really were doing the majority of our stunts, and we were on top of this very, very high pyramid, and we could have fallen off. And there were people that said they would have caught us, but it was like too late. They would have caught our they would have helped us to the hospital, it seemed like. What were they dressed as well? They were dressed as green screen blue ninjas. They were covered completely in colors that could be wiped out. And they were there, but I didn't feel tremendously confident in them, so it was sort of like, they were like, I got you, and I was like, okay, I got you. And anyway, but the fight scene was incredible, and it was a real pleasure, because, instead of shooting, like, I guess our fight scene was about 3 minutes long or so, but instead of shooting that all the way through, from many different angles, Edgar already knew what angles he wanted. for the fight, and what he needed out of each angle specifically. In fact, he'd already shot the fight scene with 2 stunt doubles who looked exactly like us on a